Yeah, the kitchen space is great. I think just having a chat, at the end of the working day, as you're cooking, as you're chatting with people, kind of entertaining, as long as guests don't mind the smells, coming out, then I think it's great. This is the space where we spend most of the time.
May I show it?
Yeah.
This is where you eat. This is where guests mostly sit who have been evicted to the other room because this is happening here. But you have guests often, which is quite...
Yeah, I mean,
something.
we like entertaining. We like having people over and eating our food. Like whether it's good or not, I don't know. But we like, having sound of people, I think. Yeah, I like that atmosphere of, friends coming together and, having, a meal, having a drink and having a chat. And I think it's great. And I think, and also I think having children also like run about, which is great. So I think, and that's something that, again, going back to my childhood and my upbringing, you constantly had, in say like Nagaland, the kitchen was where the fire was. You sat around, and people would be coming and going. Like neighbors, family, friends would come and sit around the kitchen. Have some black tea, talk about politics. About like family problems, kind of enact dramas, about kind of, I don't know, like relatives and all of that. So I think the kitchen is a great space, I think. Yeah, but it's also the place where, all the food is kept, the grain. We used to have a like rice like box actually, which is quite common kind of when I was growing up. A lot of the homes in Kohima would have these large like wooden rice like box where you kept the rice, and so you close it and you can also sit on top of it, right? I mean, it was like big presence in the kitchen actually. And of course, the fireplace was important, right? Wasn't it? Because you had the like layers that was there to smoke chilies, bamboo shoots, yam, dried fish, all of that was kept on those kind of layers, as including like wood, of course, to dry the wood, to like burn. So I mean, all of that was an important part of my like memory actually. So the kitchen was always a space which was welcoming and warm, especially because of the fire going, and also the smells of it, and then people coming in and going. I think that was a great thing about the kitchen actually. So I think, yeah, the kitchen space is something that I often kind of enjoy a lot, and it's also kind of open plan here, so you can see your guests, cooking, you can interact with them, and people will often ask you about the smells, and you have an opportunity to explain.
Yeah.
And say that this smell is this. Or
Well, clearly this is a modern kitchen, because this is something we severely lack. A, electricity, B, water,
yes.
C,
yes.
the electricity it will consume and the space.
Yeah. No, I think this is, of course, and because we host a lot of people, and a lot of meals are eaten, it's great to have a dishwasher. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll be like washing like dishes kind of endlessly. Yeah. No. It's nice to. Yeah, it's nice to have that combination of technology but also, yeah, the ease of cooking. But also, I think cooking is more than just that. I think, people can have, all the technology, but people may not cook. Or they rely on, say, like ready-made meals, or, but I think to have that and combine that with the intricacies of taste and, texture and identity, I think, yeah, that's important. And that's not easily done, I think, because you can easily like lose this. I mean, I could easily stop cooking pork like this, but I think, it's something that is quite intrinsic to my kind of identity, and yeah, I mean, hopefully the kids will also kind of enjoy it, one day.
Oh, one day? Do they not enjoy it already?
No, they like pork, but yeah, I think it's just a matter of taste and habit, I think. Because when they go to Nagaland, they don't complain much, and what is given, is eaten, as long as it's not very hot. But here, of course, they've got choices, right? But no, I think, they will. The older ones, especially, I think, is slowly appreciating. All right, and that's quite interesting. Yeah, but it's also age, I think.
Yeah. I mean, some of us still can't eat hot food, so.
Yeah.
But the Naga kitchen has options for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And the food itself, I mean, I've barely come across food that is in itself so hot, whereas the chutney on the side gives you the kick you need. Do you make chutneys?
Yes, I do make chutneys as well. Not all the time, but yeah, just plain chutneys actually. Just chilies with tomato, and just mash them up with some salt, and put some, say, mushrooms or some dried fish. When you get Scotland, you get really good dried fish actually. It's dried like mackerel, and yeah. So I also make this dish called itsen. Well, you know itsen, right? So itsen is, it's a simple kind of dish. Often we just salt, tomato, potatoes often, and it's a bamboo shoot, and people often put some dried fish or smoked pork, as well, and that is a good kind of, again, if you're talking about Naga food, I mean, that's one of the common ones that you often eat. So I mean, you can put anishi as well in it. So it's yes. So I sometimes do it with potato, tomato, some red chilies, and the smoked mackerels that you get, which are really, really good, and they're quite kind of oily as well, and meaty. So I mean, it's nice, and of course it's without bones, so it's nice, and then you can have that as a Naga. I mean, in fact, people, who come from Nagaland, and I cook them that dish, and they enjoy it a lot. And they say, "Oh yeah, I mean, the fish is excellent." Yeah.
That's cool. But having lived there, I saw something that is quite different from elsewhere, which is that, okay, while majority of the days women cook, cooking is not something that is segregated activity in terms of gender. Men also cook a lot. But a lot of men cook also very specific kinds of things, like deer meat. They'll cook it, in a separate kitchen, I've noticed, when there are big male gatherings or something. So, I mean, do you find that cooking as an activity is segregated in Nagaland, or it's not? Or what kind of gender trends do you see among food practices in kitchen specifically?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends family to family, isn't it? I think it's so hard to generalize, but at least in my experience, I think the two genders have always interacted in the kitchen. Sure, I mean, there were certain dishes that men would cook and certain that women would cook. But I think that's less of a division, at least in my experience, in my family kitchen. My mother would cook particular kinds of dishes. I think mainly non-Naga food type. While my father would do primarily the kind of Naga style. And I think we have also introduced things to that mix as children. Like salads, like for instance, we hardly used to eat salads, but now of course we have salads as well, and a lot of like baking. We used to I wasn't interested in that, but my brothers and sisters were interested in like baking as well, so you have that introduction. So I think it depends on family, but I have seen, especially in my fieldwork, like in say Haflong area, you see it's like women who do majority of the cooking, the household stuff, from shopping to cooking the rice and the chicken and the chutneys and all of that. Right? It's all done by women. Men cook on big occasions like weddings or important like rituals, and of course like men are the ones in charge of cutting the meat and kind of hunting. So I think in that sense, yes, in certain contexts, I think it is quite clear cut, the kind of division, I think, of who does what. But the everyday cooking, I think, is done primarily by like women, right? Yeah, but in my household it was very different, I think, and you did see more of the two genders, kind of interact in the kitchen, and that's why I think, I cook a lot. And I enjoy it. I don't see it as a male or female task. It's something that I like to create. It's something that I like to enjoy, and also to feed. So in that sense, I don't think a question of gender comes into play. Yeah.
This is smelling really good at this point.
Yeah. So it's the smell of the ginger and the garlic primarily, isn't it? Yeah.
So, we are cooking something else at this point.
Yes. Having a quick drink. We're cooking chickpea and spinach. We also have a couple of vegetarians. So I thought I'll do the Indian style with frying some onions, ginger garlic paste, as they often say in India. Ginger garlic paste.
Okay.
And then put some spices, and then put the tomato, and then the chickpeas, which I've been soaking for a few hours. And then the power of the freezer, because I've got some frozen frozen spinach, which is actually quite good. I think the two frozen things I like are spinach and peas, green peas, because they're great, I think.
And they don't stay too long, and you don't get peas very easily in any case in the market.
Yeah. And of course, isn't this the transition from like labor? The whole setting and shelling peas, right? Which can take. Well, I'm sure it's great, if you are, you've got lots of time. But I think because we don't have a lot of time like nowadays, and everybody's in a hurry, the frozen peas I think are great. Right, so
do you cook a lot of vegetarian food?
Yes, increasingly. I think especially because my wife is vegetarian, so there has to be, of course, like vegetarian dishes. But I think generally, like say, if I'm cooking like Naga food, then, or even Indian food, there's often like dal, say, or chickpea and spinach, or like paneer is another thing that I often do. And potato fry or aloo fry.
Aloo fry, yeah.
Aloo fry is another one of my favorites actually. The kids like it a lot. Aloo fry. Now these spices are quite interesting because I get them from a cooperative in like Delhi.
And what?
Servants of the People Society, jeera powder.
Masala Center. What is Servants of the People Society?
Well, I think it's like a farmers cooperative, I think. Yeah, and they kind of encourage. So I think people, they grind spices and they sell it, that kind of like model. And at least so this is where my sister lives. It's around that area that they tend to sell spices, and I often go there and get my spices every time I'm there in India. And often like last week, and the spices are quite strong, so I don't use a lot of it. But it gives you some nice flavor. And then as you're frying that, because the spices, you just don't want it to burn. Put it in the tomato. With some bay leaves.
I mean, it must be quite a thing to have a vegetarian partner for somebody who does cook and eat a lot of meat. So how do you all manage?
Well, to be honest, yes, we eat meat. I mean, I eat meat, but I don't cook a lot of meat as well. I think I've over the years decreased a bit in terms of eating lots of meat. Sometimes, of course, you crave, for your pork and like bamboo shoot, and you cook that. But I think vegetarian food as well, I think we've been exploring a lot, just in terms of the different like varieties of like vegetarian food that you can eat. I think growing up, of course, we often associate like vegetarian with people from the kind of other parts of India, right? Because like Nagas, of course, if you say that you're like vegetarian, people will like look at you in a very odd way. But I think vegetarianism, yeah, I think we're experimenting a lot more. I mean, it's not only Indian food that we experiment with. There's also a lot of Asian cooking, like tofu. We use a lot of tofu for our like vegetarian cooking. We also make pizza, so like vegetarian pizza. One of my favorite is like mung beans, actually, from Korea. So you grind it, like vada. So I mean, it creates that paste. Yeah, and then you just fry it with, say, kind of spices, and you can put chili, you can put onions, and all of that, and it makes those lovely pancakes. So you can do all of that. South Indian food is also quite good. We haven't really experimented much with South Indian food, but especially kind of Italy, vada and dosa, I think we have tried to do that. Just like waiting actually for the oil to separate.
So this sort of cooking is a little different from, I think, that sort of cooking. Like, do you think there are different things that become important in one thing and the other?
Yeah, I think the ingredients are slightly different, isn't it? But the technique, I think, overall, or the sense of cooking, I think, is quite similar. So again, for something like this, I don't have a recipe. It's all the, again, I've seen people do it, or I've experimented with, say, different masalas, or bay leaves, all of these things. But the one constant spice that I often put in every, say chickpea or dal or potato is turmeric. And turmeric has that kind of warming personality, right? I think, especially in cooking. So turmeric is quite nice, especially if you get good turmeric, I think. And turmeric from the northeast, it's nice. I mean, I like that. So, yeah, but I haven't tried turmeric in pork, actually. So, maybe...
No, we do. We make it at home in the space that I live in. We put potato and turmeric in pork as well. Yeah. We call it Indian style pork.
Indian style pork, yeah. No, I haven't tried that actually. I think I would like to. Well, yeah, again, experiment. But I know that some people also, the Khasi pork is also quite nice with the black sesame and turmeric as well. I think they put and they mix it and then they fry it, and it gives it that lovely paste around the pork. I think that's quite nice as well. The Nepalis also have a pork curry style, which is quite thick, that gravy, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are different ways. I think the techniques and the sentiment are quite similar, right? I mean, it's so if you're cooking Indian food. So, say for instance, food like this, it does also remind me of home. Well, I mean, it's not that we don't fry things at home, right? But also, it reminds me of India a lot, especially Delhi or, the street cooking, the smell of the tandoor and, all those things that people are frying in the streets, right? Create a lovely aroma, I think. So it's a cultural sense as well that you get, especially when you're cooking. Now the chickpeas go in, and I'm gonna now see. I mean, if this was a cooking show, I think I would separate the chickpeas out first and say, right. But
this is a cooking show.
This is all quite freestyle, kind of improvisation. Yeah, so I think the chickpeas have soaked a bit. I mean, ideally, I would like to soak the chickpeas overnight, but I haven't done that.
How long have you soaked them for?
I've soaked them for around 4 hours,
okay.
5 hours.
So you don't buy those canned chickpeas?
No, please. No, the canned chickpeas are okay. But if you want really good chickpea curry, or say hummus as well, something that we often kind of eat a lot, and we also make it, is to get the hard chickpeas and you soak it overnight and you boil it, and then you get this lovely texture, I think, to the chickpeas, because the canned ones are also good. I'm not saying that they're not bad, but they're a bit soft, and so I think cooking with them, you have to be aware that not to leave it for too long, because with curries, a part of the attraction of curries is to let it cook a bit, in the in the spices, and people say that the best curry is eaten the next day, right? You cook it and you keep it in the fridge, and then you take it or you heat it up. Oof, it's great. So, and same with most foods actually, even with the pork. I mean, if you eat it the next day, it's much better.
Yep. It's marinated even.
Yeah, it gels. I mean, all the flavors they come together kind of overnight.
So what's the status with the pork? It's still brewing in
Yeah. So
chilies, garlic, ginger.
yeah, a bit more. So.
And you haven't added salt yet.
No, I haven't added salt. I mean, salt is. Yeah, well, I mean, it's up to the individual, but you can kind of add the salt. I like the feeling of putting the salt towards the end because you know that it's cooked, and the taste is that you can taste it. But I mean, I wouldn't put it kind of at the end. I would put it towards the end, but you should also allow the salt to kind of like mix with the meat, and some people put it earlier. So right about now is the time actually that I would put the salt. But again,
So how long have we been cooking this for already?
kind of under an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, under an hour.
Do you have salt preference?
Yes, I use sea salt. The flaky ones, the crystal ones, and they are tasted.
Taste. Okay.
It's nice.
It is, but on its own. Ow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better than the grainy bitter salt. Yeah.
But food is always like that. You have to taste the ingredients. Otherwise, how are you going to know
True.
what the flavor is like? And I think just tasting it raw, gives you a sense of. See, I mean that's salt, right? I've tasted it, so I kind of know how salty it is and how much I should be putting. See, again, I don't have a scientific measurement. I just play it by ear, and I think that's the joy of cooking. I think So now this has come to a boil. What I would do is I would cover this and just slow it on the flame a bit and let it cook a bit, and then I will put some spinach afterwards. Yeah.
What's the deal with big flames and small flames? How does one understand when to use big flames and when to use small flames?
Well, I think it's the big flame is of course intense cooking. It's the heat is stronger, and the food kind of boils, and it maybe it might cook quicker. But especially with meats, I think you have to. Sometimes, of course, you cook something in high heat. Say like a steak. If you're cooking in barbecue or something like it's high heat. And then it's the intensity of it, and then you kind of relax the meat, and then you eat it, right? I mean, it gives you that lovely texture, I think. But something like pork here, I think I would like to slow cook it so that the meat breaks down slowly, so it's not the intense heat. Yeah, and that's what I like about the slow cooking. So it takes a bit longer, but I think it is more rewarding, I think, at the end of the day. And same with kind of Indian cooking as well. I think slow, a bit slow cooking, I mean, it's nice because all the spices come together. And yeah.
Yeah, there's so many different kinds of cooking. For example, when we traveled northeast and met very different kinds of communities, communities located as well as from people who had moved there to do certain kind of work, like RSS Pracharaks, for instance. I mean, the kind of food cultures we came across were quite different. Do you remember any food stories during the time of these sort of travels during your fieldwork?
Yeah, I think Shillong in particular, I think there was a lot of Chinese food, right? I mean, if you remember. And of course we ate Khasi food as well, but yeah, it wasn't very common. I think it was quite hard to find restaurants. I think we tried that Manipuri restaurant as well, which took ages. So I think, and Shillong is also very like multicultural. It's got people from all over. So the food culture there is again very different, isn't it? I mean, like you get Chinese food along with hot dogs and burgers and kebabs and everything like that. So which was quite interesting, and of course your Indian food as well. Less of Khasi food. I think I would have liked to try more Khasi and Garo food, but unfortunately was not able to as much.
I think Tripura was interesting that way.
Tripura was very interesting, wasn't it? Yeah.
I remember the Bengali, two brothers had fought and put food joint 1 and food joint 2,
Yeah,
and there was a
yeah.
competition about which one had the better Ilish.
But I mean, that was also the Ilish, right? I mean, yeah, the Ilish Mas. Yeah, it was. You didn't really have so many joints, right? I mean, or like places to eat. You had the traditional Bengali food, with the fish and the prawns, the like chingri mas. And you also had that. I think it was a KFC, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in Agartala. So I mean, it was quite interesting. I think. Yeah, and the place that we had lunch in was also not bad. It was the traditional thali type with your like mango pickles and everything like that, which was more of a like Bengali kind of influence. But the last day, remember we ate at that like friends of ours, and the food was again very much like Naga food, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, this is the indigenous tribal people there, and their food was again very, very different to the kind of Bengali kind of influence. So it was more like boiled chilies, chutneys, like boil. So yeah, and Arunachal, of course, was also quite interesting because, I mean, the food choices were again quite limited, at least, in the like restaurants and all of that.
It was quite a task to find food.
Yeah. And the canteen, the university canteen was again very much your kind of Indian, your egg rolls and
Omelette,
like chicken roll,
bread,
omelette,
yeah.
and
Your standard,
puris and
like
biryani.
canteen fare across India,
yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but the time that we were invited to the Shaka in
Yes.
Tripura, in
Arunachal.
the food was very bland. So it was as if to make a statement that food is primarily for survival. It's to fill our empty stomachs. That kind of ideology of we serve the nation first, and we put all our energies towards that. But the food culture was again very different. I mean, so bland. So it was primarily rice and a bit of this. I think like boil. I think we had, and there's like water, which was not even
Water, yeah.
kind of like seasoned. And they came around with a boiled egg each, like for us to eat. So I think it wasn't the best culinary experience, but it's also ideological, I think, and that was the point, I think, to showcase that we are simple and we kind of eat the food of the soil almost, but with no flavor.
Yeah.
The flip side of that as well, is that a lot of people are kind of eating a lot more, I think. I mean, even in say like Nagaland, and it's so the previous kind of like lifestyle that our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation of like working in the fields, and of course you are expending a lot of energy and you're constantly burning, aren't you, right? And so you supplement that by eating a lot of rice. But now, of course, we have stopped the kind of agrarian practices, but we're still eating the same amount of rice. So I think a lot of health problems are now coming up as well, amongst especially the middle class. You see a lot of that, and the food choices are, even more. I think. I remember doing fieldwork in 2004 and 5. In Zebi villages, and meat was eaten maybe just once a month. Yeah, and it was primarily chicken. Because pork again was quite expensive, and pork was eaten primarily when there was a feast or festival of some sort, but it was primarily fish and chicken. And of course, you used to get a lot of dried fish. Chicken was your own, you just. So I think, yeah, and I think the food practice. I think people have more choices and more access to food than say maybe 20, 30 years ago. And I think that has created another kind of excess, I think, which people need to be careful of, because I've heard so many stories about people with health problems, of this or that, because of the kind of excess available. And somewhere like Dimapur, say for instance, or Kohima or Mokchong, you see so many other say types of food and restaurants, right? The choices available are fantastic, but it can also lead to the kind of excess that I've been talking about.
Yeah. But talking about rice, I don't see rice yet, and I know that rice is.
Yes, rice you will cook at the end. As you can see, I've got
What rice do you eat
so
here?
jasmine.
Okay.
Thai, yeah.
Do you get it from Sainsbury's?
Yeah. So the Thai, I often get the Thai rice from Thailand, but I think this one is also used from Thailand but packaged in the UK.
I see.
And I think the jasmine rice comes closest to our kind of rice at home. So it's I mean, how to explain it? It's slightly, the smell is there, the wonderful fragrance is there, but also it's smoother on the palate, I think, I think basmati can be crunchier, I think, or it's slightly harder. But the Thai jasmine rice in particular, I think I think it comes closest to the kind of rice that I would eat, Yeah.
That smells good.
Yeah, let's see. A bit more. And also salt. Seasoning. Because I didn't put any salt in here actually. Okay.
And rice is also seed, right?
Yes.
What is rice?
Yes, it is a seed, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Aren't you doing some work with seeds?
Yes, I am doing some work with seeds, kind of understanding seeds, and so it's not so much about what kind of seed it is, or but I'm looking at seeds as something that has power to influence human activity, human behavior, like memories, or seeds as heritage that you pass it on from one generation to the other. So it's like a heirloom. So I'm interested in seeds in that sense, but also I think just looking at seeds and the power of seeds, and I've learned a lot about kinds of cultivation, what kind of rice grows where, and I think one of the lessons is that seeds, the kinds of seeds that you grow, I think, that it depend on the local weather, soil, availability of water, as well as the human hands that plant, the seeds. I think all of that is very important, and I think preserving that kind of cultural practices around seeds, I think, is the more sustainable approach. Though I know that it's a lot of work, and I don't want to like romanticize, kind of agrarian practices, but I've observed a lot of agrarian practices, throughout my like research, and it's backbreaking. I mean, it's especially the June fields, on the slope, and you've got to burn, you've got to cut, sow, and it's very, very difficult. But I think the kind of rice that you get in the June fields is very different to like market like rice, right?
We have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
From okay. Instead of pork, can you substitute it with tofu? Because I think people like that better.
Yes, you can substitute it with tofu, but tofu is often called the meat of for the vegetarians. I mean, like, because it's got it's not a similar texture, but it's got that kind of a slight texture to like meat. So you smoke it, you dehydrate it as well, you dry it out. So I mean, it's got that kind of texture. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
The answer.
You're welcome to come with other questions.
Yeah, you're definitely good.
Yeah. So seeds, yes, I think it's and the kind of June rice. I think it's like people were saying how the market rice can be quite polished. It's very white and shiny, right?
Yeah.
Well, the June rices, they're quite like broken grains type. Their colors are also, slightly like reddish, if you will see them, or brown. That kind of rice is more suited to our like body, I think, and the way we break it down. I think because culturally, of course, because we're so used to a particular kind of like diet, that we can break that down a lot easier. And say some cultures, of course, have like potatoes, like for instance, right? And they can kind of break that down a lot more easier than say like rice. But I think we can break down rice a lot easier. But the market rice from different parts are again very, they have a particular fertilizer that like goes into it, so it's very hard to break down. And same with flour, I think, this whole debate about flour and wheat, because we are getting very kind of, a lot of the flour is bleached and all of that, which is causing a lot of problems, in terms of intolerance to like gluten. And I think that's one of the big reasons, I think, is the mass production of it. And really that overtaking local production of wheat, which is suitable to a certain climate, land and people, right? So I think the great things, or the great thing about globalization and the exchange of food across cultures, is that we have a lot more choices. And of course I can try like Mexican food, I can try Spanish food, French food and so on, but at the same time our bodies are used to certain kinds of well, it's hard to explain. I think we're hardwired in our cultural practices to eat certain things, and our like bodies are like better suited to eat say like wheat or like rice than say like potatoes. But I think because of this whole transnational aspect, which is like mixing all of that up and confusing our like bodies, then at times it can be a bit of a struggle physically, I think. but I don't know. I mean, I'm just one person speaking.
What are we doing?
So this is the like bamboo shoots. So this is I think maybe that's what I'll put. Let's see. So slightly warm water, not too hot,
Okay.
just to wash it a bit. You see?
Yeah.
That nice brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's also quite interesting is that especially when you think about the different kinds of rice, actually it's quite interesting is that I've actually experienced a lot more variety since coming to Edinburgh, because you have the like West African rice, well of course other parts of Africa also have, the Caribbeans have a particular way, of course the Americans with their Uncle Ben's. But rice is so essential, and the Japanese and the Chinese. The Japanese rice I love actually, because it's a bit like jasmine as well, but I mean it's got a very delicate kind of like texture, I think, to it. But to some extent, the two brands of or two kinds of rice which have dominated, I think, are your like basmati and Thai. Thai like jasmine.
They've dominated in your kitchen or in most?
Well, I think, I mean, well, at least in Scotland, when I go shopping or when I see people eat like rice, those are the two that they choose. Okay, it's either Thai or like basmati. And I think, yeah, that's also a shame because there are different kinds of rice that I would kind of experiment. So this is napa. This is quite kind of intricately packed by my mother, but
And labeled.
yeah, labeled as well.
What's your favorite herb?
See? I like napa.
I think that's my favorite.
I think it's got a particular, it's got that almost, what's the word, kind of like lemony flavor, right?
Yeah, and whether with ahuni, anishi, it just flowers. Wow. And this is also frozen, is it?
Yes, this is frozen and I've taken it out of the freezer. So now the mixing, right?
Is this the final stage of the pork cooking?
Yes, this is the final stage. I want to do it quite dry because, of course, we've got gravy as well. So, I don't want to do it quite liquidy. I mean, a bit of gravy is good, but not too much. Try to and see if this is okay with salt.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, is that okay? Yes, I mean it's hot.
Yeah.
Heat hot.
Heat hot, yeah. Yeah, it's more than okay.
Good. So what I do is I'll put in a little bit more of the liquid as well, just to you know, to
Of the
just
bamboo
a little
shoots.
bit, yeah, not much, just to bring in the sourness a bit, and this pork is quite popular amongst my friends.